Right, good morning, Donna. Lovely to talk to you. Really excited today to sort of really focus on sort of what we both do for a living and how those things are really quite complementary, I think, in the conversations that we've had previously. Of your specialism around burnout. So really interested to like have a bit of a rummage around in that and sort of thinking about the signs, symptoms, and strategies to deal with that. And I think when we got talking that led to doing this morning, just really my angle that I come at it from in terms of the trying to encourage people to be a bit more selfish in their lives and see that as a positive thing. So probably a really great place to start would maybe be in terms of you saying a little bit about you and your background and what you do.
Yeah, happy to. And thank you for this opportunity. I was delighted when you reached out to ask me to do this. So a little bit about me. So I've been in business for about 4 years now. And during that time, I have been coaching and training people from all backgrounds and sectors on how to burn bright in their career and not out. And more recently, about a year and a half or so ago, I started to really get more specific with who I was targeting. And now I have a growing specialism with working with junior lawyers and helping them navigate those first few years of their legal career in a way that embeds in the positive habits, like you were saying about putting themselves first, being selfish with their well-being, so that they burn bright and thrive in their legal career rather than getting to associate level or partner level and doing really well successfully at work, but from a well-being point of view, being completely burnt out and exhausted. So the last 4 years have been really, really fun, challenging, as I'm sure we'll get onto, but essentially my mission is to make burn bright the norm. That's
which I absolutely love, in as much as I talk a lot in the work that I do about that inner light. And I think that's probably why you and I kind of hit it off and connected, really, because I talk about that inner light a lot and about how, particularly in my career, certainly, which again is why it resonates, but very much from a personal point of view, in my personal life, I dimmed that light down a lot. I spent decades doing that, sort of trying to fit into something that I thought I should be fitting in with. And I guess, I don't want to make assumptions, but, I know from coming from a big corporate background that, there's sometimes that pressure in terms of conformity to be a certain type of person. And therefore you sort of park a little bit of who you genuinely are. And for me, the work that I now do is about saying, right, okay, let's get that inner light burning and you, as you would put it, burning bright.
Definitely. So tell us a bit more about what it is you do then, and who your key clients are.
Yeah, so I think for me, I have a brand and a business called Redefining SELFISH. And SELFISH itself is actually a model. So each of the letters of SELFISH stand for something. And I use that model. I have to say, work with women. So I think particularly where women have deprioritized themselves. So they've usually, my clients are normally professionals. They've usually are parents as well. And probably sort of just at that point in their lives where actually they've given out a lot, professionally, at home, to family. I talk a lot in my work about identity. So the I in selfish stands for identity, because it's very much about saying, I've given all of this stuff out and I've almost lost myself to the labels that I take on. So it might be parent, it might be boss, it might be employee, it might be partner, whatever those labels are in life. And it's fine. It's lovely to have all of those bits of our life. But sometimes in amongst that, we lose who we are. So I work a lot, like I said, typically with women, not exclusively, but very much around sort of confidence, identity. And I always talk about standing on your square of the world, but really standing tall on that square of the world. And back to what we were saying about, then letting that light shine and going, actually, this is who I am. And I'm going to reclaim that. So those are the people that I tend to work with.
Love it so much. What do you think is key about your journey, Carolyn, that's led you to be doing this work with predominantly professional women around this idea of letting that light shine? What is it that's got you to where you are today that's made you so passionate about what you do?
Because I was that woman. So my, I had an amazing corporate career. So I worked in HR, and I had, 20 plus years of working in HR, having an amazing career, working for some huge organizations, some of the world's largest organizations, from an employee point of view, some of the most well-recognized brands. And all of that being great. And I loved it. And I had some great experiences, but some of it was incredibly challenging when you're a senior leader. Particularly when you're a woman in some of those businesses, because quite a lot of the environments I worked in were very male dominated. And I think that in itself has its own dynamic and its own challenges. But I guess the key bit is that in the background in my personal life was just a disaster. And all of that led from very low self-worth that sort of was set in place at a very young age. So I was probably about 7 when, there was sort of very key incident in my life that led to that sense of I need to do whatever it takes to fit in and belong. Otherwise I'll sort of end up on my own and won't be loved. And that led to some really awful decisions that I wasn't realizing whilst I was making them, but some awful decisions about people that I let into my life. And so in 2018, when it all caved in, so I lost my job, I lost my relationship, I lost my step family, I lost my home, all in the space of 10 days. It led me to write my book, so the first of my books, and really that then was the catalyst, looking back on all of that and understanding at that stage, because I really had to reset myself as to who I was and what I stood for, and again, that identity. And really just worked from there and said, okay, who do I want to be going forward? What do I want out of my life going forward? And now, like, turning that journey into a passion of helping other people to do and feel the same.
Brilliant. It's it always fascinates me how whenever I meet a kindred spirit, someone like-minded such as yourself, and you sort of find out about each other, and there's something that happens, it's like the part of your world implodes and you have that moment of, oh, this is what I need to be doing, and you sort of take your mess and make it your message, so to speak.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, fantastic idea, because like something sort of similar happened to you, didn't it?
Oh my goodness, yeah. So so the reason I'm so passionate about making Burn Bright the norm is because basically I had been struggling and running from burnout virtually my whole career. So my background is in law. I qualified as a solicitor, practiced for several years, and that didn't work out. So I moved on. I qualified in HR, similar path to you, and did that for several years, and that didn't work out. And then I moved into, so I had several career changes. And what happened was, back in 2017, it all came to a crashing halt when I suffered a severe burnout. And by burnout, I don't know about you, but back then when people talked about burnout, to me it was like, well, you're obviously just tired. You need a few days off. You just need some good sleep. Yeah. That's not what burnout is. My burnout, when it manifested, ended up with me losing the ability to walk for several days, which was pretty scary. I mean, I had a young child at the time. We'd just moved house. It just wasn't convenient to be burnt out and not be able to walk. But what I realized when I'd figured out what was going on is that I'd been dodging burnout right from when I was a junior lawyer. So when you're dealing with that new role, those high expectations, that challenge of dealing with imposter syndrome, and knowing that you've got needs from a well-being point of view, but like you were saying earlier, you feel like you've got to conform and just work hard and fit in. When those things got to their worst, what I'd do, instead of dealing with them in the moment, is I'd change jobs. It's like, oh, I'm clearly not cut out to this. I'll go and do another job. And I'd start the other job. And then the feelings of trying to fit in, conform, imposter syndrome, overwhelm would get to a certain level. I'd be like, oh, I clearly can't do this. I'll change jobs. So I'd been dodging burnout for about 20 years until in 2017, burnout said, enough's enough. We're taking the legs from under you, because that seems to be the only way you'll stop.
Yeah.
And so that was what happened to me. It took me 3 months to recover, to go from not walking at all to being able to walk again. And it just, now I'm grateful for it, but I don't know if you felt like this in 2018, Carolyn, where at the time I was really resentful of the burnout. It's like, this can't be happening. I've worked too hard to get to where I am for it all to fall apart because I'm burnt out. Are you kidding? But then the more I looked into it and the more I did my research and the more I took steps to recover, I realized that actually so many of us are existing and functioning with burnout. So many of us are living in this way we think we ought to be, rather than being our true selves and putting our needs first. And so as I recovered and decided to go live with my own business, that was when I thought, right, I don't want this to happen to anybody else. So that's what took me full circle back to the legal profession, to working with the junior lawyers to help them at the stage I was at, to deal with the imposter syndrome, deal with the overwhelm, deal with the high levels of stress, so that they learn right at the start how to burn bright and be successful, rather than be like me and do like a career dodgeball until burnout eventually catches up. But yes, it's a shame that it takes these big blow ups in our lives to make us stop. But how great is it that you and I now help others avoid the big blow ups and take action before time?
Yeah, and I think there's so much of that I can identify with, because you're right, you know, that whole sense of like, oh my God, you know, this can't be happening to me. And you know what I did when it happened to me is, you know, I took some time to reset. I went away on a retreat, which helped me. I had therapy at the time. I spent some quite a considerable amount of time with a clinical psychologist. But actually, the thing that I did in making the change for me was, I thought, right, I've got myself sorted, it's all great. And then I started putting back in place all those things that I thought were what would make me happy, and all the things that I thought success looked like, you know. So I need to make sure everybody stops worrying. You know, everybody needs to know I'm okay now. So, you know, I got myself the, you know, big new job, you know, next rung on the ladder, because, you know, that's great, that's stability. And then I was, you know, buying myself a house, and I'd got myself a new car, and, you know, all of that stuff. And I put all of those things in place. And it was literally a couple of months into the new job where I had a text exchange with my best friend, actually. And, you know, I won't use the words that I used, but I essentially in the text said, I don't want to do this anymore. And it was a real shock, actually, to me to actually say that out loud, because I hadn't even realized it was there. And, you know, like you do with your best friend, you know, that like your best friend's the one that asks you the questions that you don't really want to be asked, but you really need to be asked. And I suddenly sort of declared that I didn't want to do it. And it was really interesting, because that need to sort of go, right, well, this is what functioning looks like. This is what success looks like. And I was coming at it from a place of being so much better in myself. You know, so my identity was so much clearer. I was, you know, I was in a much, much more positive place, having gone through several months, you know, that sound very, very similar to you. But I just put back in place all the stuff that I thought, right, okay, I'm now fixed. Let's go back to the corporate world. And it was just that realization. I think it took time for me, and it took several months of it to settle in and go, this isn't the route for me anymore. I've changed so much that I want to do something different, you know, and I'm loath to sort of say it's that calling, because that sounds a little bit naff, doesn't it? But it was that thing, you know, the burning light that I had then became a different kind of light for a different purpose. And that's when, you know, and again, it took another year of sort of starting to plan, trying to work out what I wanted to do. I started to write my book, you know, whilst I was still fulfilling that corporate job. But I took some decisions in that time. I didn't buy the house I was going to buy. You know, I started to take some real decisions about having a different kind of future, and managing that in a different way. And I think that's probably one of my messages with people, is that sometimes it just takes time, you know. It's kind of that trusting the process. Now that's really hard, isn't it, when you're going through it?
Yeah, definitely. I think also when you finally reach that stage of wanting to make a change and needing to make a change, there is almost that sense of, but I want it now. I want it now.
Yeah.
You know, what happened to you in 2018 didn't just happen overnight. You know, it was building up over time. My burnout, my severe burnout, happened over time. And this is one of the things I say to all my clients, you know, you didn't burn out overnight. You're not going to burn bright overnight either. So you need to give yourself permission to take the time. Just on that, Carolyn, where are you now with those those old habits, those sort of tendencies to not put yourself first, to feel selfish when you're meeting your own needs? Where are you now on that journey?
It's a really good question, because I think that then, like, I left corporate world in the end of March 2020, and then obviously, just at the start of the pandemic. So I think it's been really interesting, I think, from that point of view, because I live by myself, and we were in a pandemic, we're in a lockdown, I'm starting a new business. And I can honestly say I have worked so hard because, because I was passionate about it, B, I had things that I really wanted to achieve, C, there was nothing else to do. So, there was a bit, you're like looking at stuff online, aren't you? Looking at like memes and other thing that people posted. They're all like, oh, like we've binge watched everything on Netflix. I watched nothing on Netflix during lockdown. In fact, I've sort of had to do a little bit of catch up, and even then I've still not watched, Tiger King or whatever else. So I think that managing that, putting that same effort and energy, and I think that adjustment to working in a different way, I think that's been the biggest adjustment, because I think it's really easy to think, right, well, in corporate world, you don't work 9 to 5, because that's hence why we get burnt out. But, that mentality, isn't it? It's like Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And actually, one of the biggest things that I learned was actually I've now got the freedom to work how I want, when I want, when I'm at my best, and on different days, that might be at different times of the day. And similarly, it might be different days of the week. So particularly in lockdown, what I discovered early on was that, particularly because I was by myself, you might finish on a Friday night, but then you've just sat with acres of 48 hours of, well, like, there's not an awful lot to do, and, and I'm not a, sit down and watch Netflix kind of a person anyway. I probably need to get better at that. I'm not very good at relaxing. But so I think that managing that has been quite hard. And I think what's interesting for me now as we come out of lockdown is, as some of the world, reopens, I love going to the gym and I dance and I belong to a choir and stuff like that, is that, actually then I'm looking forward to finding a bit of that equilibrium, because what I had to remind myself during lockdown and like simultaneously starting a new business, which is always hard in whatever times, is, like you say, those needs to care for myself, those needs to sometimes go, do you know what? It's just not happening for you today. That creativity, that thing that you need to write, that chapter that I need to finish, or I wanted to finish, if it's just not happening, sometimes you just got to step away from it. And I think that was one of the key things for me. But I think the main challenge, and I think particularly with, again, starting your own business, which takes, it's a leap of faith, you know that, is the first S of my selfish model is about self-worth. And within self-worth is so much, there's confidence in there, there's a sense of your own competence, your own abilities, and it's keeping that faith of keeping going with something, even when it's like really hard, and finding those, I like to talk about stepping stones rather than hurdles. And sometimes the stepping stones feel really small because you're not making much progress. Sometimes the stepping stones feel like really far apart and it's a real stretch to get to the next one. But I always feel like if you're doing something, it's progress. I think it's Brendan Burchard that says something along the lines of, you don't have to create a masterpiece every day. You just need to get some paint on the canvas. And trying to remind myself of that all the time. I don't know, how about you? Because again, lockdown in the last year has been tough, hasn't it?
The key lesson I've learned from lockdown, from a perspective of burning bright, is that burnout's not one of those things that's like, once you've been through it, that's it, you're done. It's not like chicken pox, you only get it once and that's it, you're fine. I wish it.
Love that.
But burnout is one of those things that it's very, very stealthy, it's very sneaky, and if you're not careful, it can creep up on you without you even realizing it. And so through lockdown, like you say, there's this perception of, we've got more time on our hands. I mean, last summer, the weather was lovely. My daughter was at home. Isn't it great? But like you, I was, my business was only 2 years old. It was only just starting to gather momentum. And I was like, where's everybody finding this extra time? So I was trying to homeschool and run a business and be a wife and all the rest of it. And I very quickly found myself on the brink of a burnout again, which I'll be honest with you, it didn't sit comfortably with me, because I thought, hang on a second, here I am training and coaching people on how to burn bright in their career, not out. I'm on the brink of another burnout.
Yeah.
How have I let that happen? But what was absolutely great was, that was a valuable lesson, because that taught me that burnout is always a risk if you're not alert to it. But second of all, it reminded me how the tools that I teach my clients on. So I created a program called the Burn Bright program. And this came out of all the work I did on myself to recover from my own burnout. So all the tools and techniques I use to help myself, I've put them into a program. So last year, when we were in the first lockdown, it was a case of, right, I'm signing up to my Burn Bright program because I need this.
Fabulous, yeah.
And so I started my program again, even though those tools are with me all the time. I've not actually done them in the process that I teach my clients in for a long time, since my burnout. And so this time last year, I took myself through my Burn Bright program and instantly stepped away from burnout and got back into that place of, in order to survive what is going on, I need to be at the top of my priority list. I need to be selfish and put me first, because my daughter needs me to do the homeschooling. My husband needs me to keep because he was a key worker. So he was busier than ever. So it's like, right, he needs to be able to do what he's got to do. So I keep the house going. And I need to keep the business up and running because my clients need me. Yeah. But I can't do that if I'm burnt out. And I think this is one of the things that I'm sure your clients find the same thing. You know this logically, you know this rationally, that for you to be at your best for the people you want to serve and help, you've got to take care of you. And it's the hardest thing. But no, so I'm in many ways, lockdown has been a challenge. But one of the things I'm grateful for during this last year is that it's reminded me that to burn bright is a forever journey. Tools and techniques that I train and coach my clients on, they're applicable throughout the whole of your life. It's not a one and done. And so I'm grateful for that. It's thank you, lockdown, for reminding me that burnout's very sneaky.
Yeah, and I think that's really, that is really important, isn't it? Because that bit about the prioritization stuff is that you're right. I mean, in the redefining selfish stuff that I do in the selfish model, very much, I do talk about some of that stuff around self-care, and there are some really basic things that you can just do around self-care. And of course, some of them are really simple things that are around, well, actually take a bit of time out and just go and have that hot bath and sort of tell the rest of your household that for this 20 minutes, it's just about me. And I'm, if I have to put a chair, underneath the door handle in the bathroom or whatever it is to stop the little people wandering in, but I understand totally that, dealing with burnout, prioritizing yourself is way more than just go and have a hot bath. It's not going to solve it. You're not going to fix it in that 20 minutes. I think it is just about saying, however, when you do those kind of things, it's just something little, it's just something small. And I talk a lot about sort of the 1% shifts you can make, the small thing that you can do every day that will actually just keep you on track, will just make you feel like you've done a little bit of something for you that's just a bit replenishing for you. And it is a lesson that I learned many, many years ago, but you're right. I then sort of lost it on the rest of my journey, where there was a point in my life where I had a slot that I physically put in my diary when I was very, very busy with my job, physically put in my diary every day. That was I think I only put in like 30 minutes at most, with, an alarm that sort of sounded beforehand, to literally just do something that was in my life that was for me. And that might be something really simple, like you need to ring the dentist and make that appointment. But the fact that that's just bothering you in the back of your head, if you spend that little bit of time, you make that phone call, you sort that out, it stops that thing going off in the back of your head that's then bothering you. So I think it's that complex message, because I think there's so much out there around self-care that is just, have a bubble bath and then that's, that'll fix it. And I don't want to, I think those things are really, really important, but it's also about those bigger, more fundamental messages, isn't it? About how do I talk to myself in my head? Because I do lots of that with my clients and within my selfish model, is we really need to pay attention to the stories we tell ourselves, to the self-talk that goes on in our heads, and all that kind of stuff. Because you're right, that burnout, the deprioritizing yourself, it's really crafty, isn't it? And, but I read something really interesting actually only this week that says an emotion actually only lasts 90 seconds. And that if you just let that emotion run and then don't feed it, because what happens, the reason we think that they carry on is that then, our brain feeds it, our anxiety feeds it. We let those thoughts become another thought and another thought and another thought, which means that 90 seconds comes a series of 90 seconds from that original, thought that negative thought, that you normally have. But actually, if you just sort of let that 90 seconds pass and sort of take a few deep breaths, then actually that feeling will pass if you don't fuel it. And it's things like that I think they're really small to hints and tips, aren't they? But sometimes it can just make a massive difference to whether we spiral out of control over something, or whether we just go, right, no, I'm really sorry, I'm not letting that in today. Like, get lost.
Yeah, not today, not playing.
Yeah.
Just to wrap up then, Carolyn, what would be one piece of advice or one motto that you would recommend to people listening to us today who might be struggling with this redefining selfish, putting themselves first and stepping away from burnout? What would be the one key nugget that you'd want people to take away today?
Yeah. I'm a massive fan. So one of the big pieces of work that I do with people in my business, I'm a massive advocate of, is all about our network. And it's about who we have around us. And I think that massively plays into how we allow ourselves to feel about ourselves, how much we let those people influence us. So a lot of what I do is around looking at, and I look at this on a couple of axes. So one, it's like, look at all the key people in your life. So, look at all the sort of the main characters that you have in your life and plot them on a line between joyful at the one end and toxic at the other. And be really brutally honest. You don't have to share it with anybody. You could just do it in your head if you don't want to write it down, if you don't want any evidence. But really plot that joyful to toxic, and really understand who those people are, and then really make a commitment to yourself to, with the joyful ones, make sure you dial them up and you spend as much time, whether it's in your head, because you might not physically spend time with them, but people can have an impact on you in your mind, as much as they can physically. So spend more time in your head or in actuality with the joyful ones, and then really look at the toxic ones and go, okay, I'm going to dial you down, either in terms of the talk that you have in my head, where I'm in dialogue with you and you have an influence on me in the way that I think about myself, or spending time with you, or the impact that you have on me, but I'm going to dial that down. So that's one of the, and I have a number of tools that sit around that, but that's in very simple terms, one of the things that I like to sort of advocate with my clients. How about you?
Well, for a start, I'm going to be doing that later. Thank you for that. Gosh, so the thing that comes to mind today, just from what we were talking about this last 20 minutes or so, is just to raise your awareness of what decisions you're taking every day, and check in with whether they are decisions that are going to move you along the burn bright path or along the burnout path. And a really simple way of doing that is when you find yourself doing anything. So for example, I don't know, let's say someone's listening to this and it's 9 o'clock of an evening, and they've got the laptop on, they've got the phone on listening to this, and they know really they should be switching off, and they're not. So one of the questions I always ask myself when I know I should be doing something for myself, but I'm not, I'll say, is this loving to me? Is this loving to me? And of course, the answer is no. Still being on my laptop at 9 o'clock and listening to something and multitasking at 9 o'clock of an evening, that's not loving to me. Now, here's the thing. You can ask yourself that question and get the answer, no, it's not, and still not do anything about it. What you've done is you've done a pattern interrupt. You've started to plant that seed in your mind of, am I doing things that are loving to me? And what you do is, as you do that over time and you repeat that mantra throughout the day, is this loving to me? As you reach for that packet of biscuits when you know you really shouldn't be eating it, is this loving to me? When you're watching the 15th episode on Netflix and it's 1 a.m. in the morning, you should be in bed, is this loving to me? It doesn't really matter what you do as a response to that statement. What matters is it's planting that seed of, am I doing things that are loving to me? And over time, I don't know how it works, Carolyn, but it's like this neuroplasticity stuff that we hear about.
Yeah.
You start noticing, you start doing more things that are loving to you.
Yeah.
So that's my tip. Is this loving to me?
Yeah, I love that. That's really good. I'm going to start asking myself that question, because one of my motivations at the moment is about being kinder to myself in a whole raft of ways. How I talk to myself, the things that I do, how I spend my time, where my energy goes. So yeah, that's I need to ask myself that question though, because I think that will really be on the money. Fabulous. And so if people watching this, will want to get hold of you, where's the best place to find you?
The best place to find me would be on my website, which is odonnatacoaching.com. When we post this, I'll pop the link.
Yeah, the link.
That, because you can book a call in with me there. You can get my email address on there. You can learn more about what I do on there. I'm also on LinkedIn, Donna Smith, coach for junior lawyers. So yes, but website or LinkedIn would be the best place. How about you?
Yeah, so same for me. I think always trying to sort of direct people to the website, because I think that's where they can find out a bit more about me, about my story, what I've done. So carolynhodbdey.com is where people can find me. But you're right, I'm on the sort of all the social media platforms. LinkedIn is also a key one for me. So yes, you can find me usually with the banner in terms of all the twats I met along the way book. So people can usually people can usually identify me from the book title.
Good stuff.
Well, it's been lovely to talk to you.
Yeah. I've really enjoyed it. As we've said before, when we first met, I think you and I could chat for hours, but I think our audience have things to be getting on with, like that self-care and well-being. So
yes, let's let them do that.
Thank you for your time today.
Yeah, and you. It's been amazing. Thank you very much.
All right. Bye for now.
Bye.